How do we move our world? This is the Performatory Talks with Noemi Andrea.
To begin with, can we do something together?
Yes.
Yay! Let's stand up then. And make eye contact with someone. Yeah? Yeah? Everybody there? And just stay a bit in this contact and take a breath, just look. And maybe try not to speak, but just to look at each other. And just by looking, try to sense how the other one is feeling. How are they today? Okay. Now you can just, in whatever way you feel appropriate, just thank each other and then you can sit down. Thanks for doing this with me. I'm Noemi, and I'm going to talk to you about embodied citizenship. And embodied citizenship is a possible approach that I propose for the challenges that our society is now facing. And because as humanity, we're in a moment of fundamental transformation. And these challenges can no longer wait. As a transformative social innovator, I want to find out how we can steer this transformation in a positive direction. And what I've learned is that if we want to solve anything, we need to go as close to the root cause as possible. And what I've noticed is that the closer, the deeper you go, the more connections you see. That ultimately, all the challenges, the developments, they're all part of the same system. And it's the system as a whole that we need to act upon if we are to realize true and resilient change. But we may ask ourselves, what's our system doing wrong now? The currently dominant ideology is capitalism, and that is based on the premises that we, humans, are essentially self-centered, materialistic, and rational beings. That means that each of us is fighting for the maximization of his own individual benefits. It also means that I want to get a bigger slice of the pie than you're getting. And this leads to an unequal division of this metaphorical pie in which some get to eat more than others. And the thing is, most of us, the so-called 99%, are at the bottom of this division. And that it's only a small elite that is getting most of the pie. And that it is this elite that is also in control of the division. Which puts the rest of us in a role of sort of passive victims of our system. And what I mean by that is that we start believing that there's nothing we can do about it. It's just the way it is. But is it? If we go back to the premises, we realize it's not entirely true. I'm sure there were moments when each of us was selfless or emotional or cared about anything else rather than material belongings. So the premises is just a construct that we created. And it is up to us to recreate it. Because it's not working anymore. It's causing injustice, inequalities. It's just not dividing the pie well. But let's take a look at how our system is now organized. There are three main actors: the market, the state, and the citizens. And now there's a disproportionate division of power between these three, in which the market is getting the biggest chunk, while us, the citizens, we're getting the smallest. And this means that the market has the biggest influence on how our system is now organized, and that its economic interests dictate the direction and the priorities of our society. which is where the premises is coming from. Because it is in the interest of the market if we compete and consume, if we are passive and rivalrous. And that's causing a lot of problems, the injustices, the inequalities. I believe that we should shift to the priorities of the community, of the citizens, that we need to reclaim the common good. And that's the pie that I was talking about earlier. And it is in our power to do so. As Margaret Mead said, never doubt that a group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. I envision a future in which we can turn rivalry into togetherness, and where we can counter oppression with a more horizontal division of power, and where we are no longer passive victims of our system, but its active creators. If we take it a bit further, where does the system come from? Well, according to the integral theory, it all starts in our consciousness. That's our thoughts, our ideas, our mental patterns. It's how we perceive the world. And that's currently the belief that we are materialistic and selfish and so on. The output of these ideas is our behavior. It's how we act in the world, which is why being competitive and individualistic and so on is so common. On a collective scale, if more people behave in a certain way, it creates a certain structure, and that's our system. So it's our capitalist economic model, it's our top-down ways of governance, or the way we organize education and health and so on. And at some point, this system becomes so embedded in our ways of being that it turns into our culture. And we start believing that being individualistic and consuming and so on is the right way to be, that it's the only way to be. If we are to break these patterns, we must go back to the consciousness. That's the level on which we should act, because if we change the way we think, the rest will follow. But where do these mental patterns, these perceptions, where do they come from? In recent years, we've gained a new understanding of how our cognitive processes work. And it seems that our bodies play a bigger part than we previously thought. The embodiment thesis attributes 3 roles to the body. Firstly, we use it to understand, to relate to our world. It's sort of our point of reference. If I say up or down, or big or small, it all depends on how my body is situated in the world. Secondly, we use it to filter our reality. So through our senses, we take in the external world. And for example, if I had a different pair of eyes, I would literally see the world differently. And thirdly, we use it to think. Because we don't rationalize everything, we also feel it. And I don't need to know a lot of physics to do a pirouette, because I don't need to calculate the angle at which my feet should go or the force I need to apply to make the movement. My body can just do it. Look. And of course, on the one hand, the way we think influences the way we move, but also the way we move influences the way we think. For example, if I'm confident, I will have a more open position. But it's also proven that if I just stand in a more open position, I will feel more confident. Another really important concept is neuroplasticity, and that explains the process through which our neural pathways are weakened or strengthened by our experiences. Basically, what we do more or less of shapes the connections in our brain. It shapes the way we think. So what I'm trying to say is that our bodies have a very big influence on the creation of our mental patterns. Now, remember what we did in the beginning. You may have noticed that just by looking into each other's eyes, we were immediately brought in a different state of mind. We were present in this interaction, in our bodies, in this moment. And that's what physical contact does, whether it's just eye contact or a hug or dancing together. It brings us in this physical here and now. And it is in this here and now that our mental patterns are formed. And it is here and now that we can change our minds through our bodies. And I believe we can use that to change our system too. So what I mean by embodied citizenship is essentially two things. Firstly, that we, as citizens, need to actively engage in the transformation of our society. That it is up to us to steer our world in a positive direction. And secondly, that we need to engage wholly with our whole being. That firstly, we cannot solve everything with our minds. We need to use the intelligence of our bodies too. And secondly, if we change the way we move, we change the way we think. And if we change the way we think, we can change our system. Thank you.